So let's talk weapon and stat line previews for the new Brutalis Dreadnought. Just how much damage can this thing do in combat? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the shiny new combat Dreadnought that's going to be coming out this weekend. The Brutalis Dreadnought is perhaps the most interesting thing about that new Strike Force Agastus box. The Space Marine mini battle force with a bunch of those Desolator missile launcher marines, plus a new lieutenant and some heavy intercessors. And over the last couple of days, Games Workshop have been giving us some previews as to what it can do in combat. Let's talk briefly about the model, Games Workshop's rules previews, and how well they fit in with the leaks. Model first, and the Brutalis Dreadnought is basically a Redemptor Dreadnought variant, essentially a combat Dreadnought based on the Blood Angels Furioso one, the choice of either some fists or talons, plus a bit of hull-mounted weaponry. It's not a direct copy of the Redemptor, there are a few bits that are slightly different, say slightly upper armoured bits around the legs and things, but overall the main differences really just are the war gear. On the top it's got a twin Icarus Iron Hail heavy stubber, a fair bit of anti-infantry there. The hull-mounted weapons are either the heavy bolters or twin multi-melters. The twin multi-melters really are quite serious firepower for this kind of model. And the general idea is that the Talons are more powerful in combat, but the Brutalis fists come with built-in bolt rifles into them, so you get a decent amount of anti-infantry shooting on top of the melee. Broadly it seems pretty popular as Dreadnoughts go. Nice to see an alternate version of the Redemptor out there, though for theoretically being the more combat and close orientated variant, it still packs really quite a lot of firepower if you give it the multi-melter and the fists. Games Workshop's previews have basically come in three different parts: a Warhammer Plus stats reveal in their battle report previews, talking a bit about the profile for its melee Talons in a rules article, and a versus contest that appears to give us the details of how many wounds it has, though I am a little bit suspect. For their battle report, they only really confirmed a couple of things about the Dreadnought. They have confirmed that the rumoured stat line was right, that it's got 5 attacks rather than the Redemptor Dreadnought's 4. With Shock Assault, that means it's usually going to be hitting with 6 attacks when it hits home on the first round of combat, and it maybe does intuitively make sense. It is armed with 2 close combat weapons rather than 1. The battle report also confirmed the Icarus Iron Hail stubbers as well. They do seem to be the profile that you'd expect from the other Primaris vehicles that get them. They hit on a 3+ against ground targets. They each have 8 shots and are all strength 4. It's likely just going to be that profile that's 36 inches with AP-1 as well. The Icarus heavy stubbers all get a +1 to hit against aircraft, which I must admit is kind of pointless. It's pretty efficient anti-infantry firepower, but if you're firing against aircraft and they've got multi-wounds, wounding on a 5+ and damage 1 just isn't going to get you very far. Moving on to the more exciting bit though, the Brutalis Talons does have the same profile as the leaks previously. It does appear to get a sweep and strike mode. Strike mode hits at strength ×2, so strength 14 if it's the same as the Redemptor, AP-4 and damage D3+3, plus you get to reroll wound rolls kind of similar to Lightning Claws. The rerolling wounds is pretty helpful, though I would bear in mind it's usually just going to be rerolling 1s, and still wound a whole ton of things in Warhammer 40k on 2s anyway. It is a bit better than the Redemptor Fist. You'll get the extra attack and the reroll wounds and the extra pip of AP. And then if it makes more sense against 1 wound infantry, you also get the option to use this sweep mode, double the attacks, likely at strength 7, AP 3 and damage 1. I guess that would usually be hitting home with 12 attacks, quite good at killing light infantry there. Overall, compared with the Redemptor Dreadnought in close combat, it's going to be usually at least 40% extra damage against any target it engages between the attacks and the reroll wound rolls. If you are fighting targets where the AP matters or the anti-horde mode is best, then it's going to be even better than that. Just for expected damage in combat, you'd average around about 7 dead guardsmen, 4 dead space marines, 2 or 3 dead terminators, a huge 19 wounds to a toughness 7 vehicle, or around about 9 or 10 to a toughness 8 vehicle with a 5+ invul and -1 damage. I feel like if you get a choice, then this thing just really wants to get in combat with anything that's big and got a whole load of wounds. The big damage D3+3 is going to be most efficient against that, plus re-rolling wound rolls means it's particularly good at killing the toughest targets around, as opposed to lighter things, which was going to wound pretty easily anyway. It seems pretty efficient against all targets. Obviously we don't know its points cost yet, but if it's kind of similar to the Redemptor Dreadnought, it looks like it would do its role well as a mainly combat naught. Finally, the last bit of previews that they did before we talk about the leaks is that they also did a Dreadnought versus contest, the new Brutalis Dreadnought versus 4 other walkers, though in terms of rules previews it didn't really give us all that much. The only thing that it seemed to imply was that the Brutalis Dreadnought might get 14 wounds on its stat line. In the fight against the Carnifex, they said that it lost 1 wound, and then it lost 2 sets of 6. Then after that apparently left the Dreadnought on just 1 wound remaining, so that would add up to 14 wounds overall. I guess maybe that could reflect that it was up-armoured a bit compared with the Redemptor. Honestly though, I just wouldn't be too surprised if it might just have been them getting their math slightly wrong. In that same bit they did also say that 2 of the attacks went through for a total of 6 damage, when it sounds like it should have got Duty Eternal against that and only received 4 damage, not 6, unless I'm missing something obvious there. Not too sure whether that really confirms anything or not. I guess until we see the actual rules, it's at least got the potential to have 14 wounds, I suppose. I must admit, while we're on the subject, I did think that the contest was a touch on the weird side. They didn't really match it up against anything that it was its own weight in points. The Brutalis is almost certainly going to cost the same amount as, say, a Redemptor Dreadnought, so around about the 185 or more, and everything that it fought was less than 150. They also seem to have equipped the Brutalis for maximal anti-armor capability, when they didn't do the same for the other units at all. The Screamer Killer isn't really the best Carnifex for just killing vehicles with strength 6, and they didn't give the Knight the Slaughter Claw either, the one that's D3 plus 3 damage. Then just to add even more randomness into it, they just randomised who went first for a full round of shooting or melee, just randomly giving a massive buff to one unit or the other. Even for a just for fun contest, it seemed like a bit of a strange set of targets, and perhaps a bit harsh not to give each of them a go where they both got to go first. Anyway, returning to the actual Brutalis Dreadnought itself, here are the leaked rules that roughly fit in with the things that Games Workshop have said so far. The only thing that doesn't entirely match up is the potential for it to have either 13 or 14 wounds. According to that previous leaks profile, it's going to move 10 inches a bit faster than the Redemptor, get those 5 attacks, which is now confirmed, and it is confirmed to have Duty Eternal at least, which would make sense. One of the biggest questions I think is whether or not they'll charge extra for the multi-melters. I feel like if they just have them the same cost as the heavy bolters, they're just going to be the auto-include best option. I feel like something like an extra 10 points for the melter upgrade is probably reasonable. My guess would be that the Fists and Talons will probably cost the same, and then you're just going to be weighing up whether you want the extra damage of the Talons, the extra AP, re-rolling wound rolls, and the choice of the sweep mode if it makes sense, or take the Fists, which are kind of similar melee to the Redemptor Dreadnought with AP 3 and damage D3 plus 3, but getting a whole bunch of bolt shots thrown in. I feel like if you do want a dedicated melee Dreadnought, it's probably going to be the Talons, but for basically an entire squad's worth of anti-infantry fire, the Claws really don't seem that bad an option either. In any case, at least from the previews, it does look like this thing has genuinely threatening melee. It'll be interesting to see a full profile when we get it. I'll certainly hope to review it on the channel just as soon as I can. If you've enjoyed the video and you'd like to see more, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the 40k videos coming just about every day, and if you'd like to check out the similar review of the preview of the Desolation Squad's rules, then check that out down in the video description. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, including seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.